What's the interest in keeping the voter disqualification rules on the books?
It puts us at a competitive disadvantage relative to Democrats.
Shut up and sit down.
Hello everyone, you are watching Disabled Rebel. I'm Jenny Knight, and today I'm starting my Texas Polititalk with Dan Patrick, or more appropriately, the strongest candidate that is going to be running against him for the seat of Texas Lieutenant Governor. Now, originally I did plan on promoting Mike Collier, who indeed is a solid Texas Democrat. But then a new hat was tossed into the ring, and I gotta tell you, I've never felt more energized for a real chance at finally unseating Dan Patrick and take him down for good, right here in the great state of Texas. I'm here to introduce you in depth to one Matthew John Dowd. I know many of you know who he is by name. Some of you may have heard a little bit of his history, a little bit of his past, while others only hear the highlights and some of the negative press that he's received in those efforts that politicians make to, slow their opponents' rolls. But this is to provide you with a comprehensive timeline on what Mr. Dowd stands for. If you're ready to see the GOP empire fall here in Texas, stick around, this is a must-see. The too long didn't read points that you need to know are as follows. Matthew Dowd began his political career as a Democrat. That's right, he gained national attention when he became a Republican under the Bush-Cheney administration, and then shocked the nation publicly when he broke with the former president, and is currently one of the few political minds in this current, present-day, chaotic world we live in where he will stand between the GOP and the American people. Dowd has made the only right decision right now, and he has returned to his Democrat origins in the state where it all began, here in Texas. One of the things I love about Matthew Dowd is that he did return to the Democrat Party, and he is unapologetically keeping with his political philosophy. His history is one of which every Texan should familiarize himself with. So here's what you need to know about Matthew Dowd and why I support him. His history is just something that Texas needs right now, and this is why. Matthew Dowd began his career in politics with Senator Lloyd Benson's Senate and campaign staffs, both of his initial Senate election and re-elections, 1976, 82, and 88 respectively, and in 1990, Dowd helped Lieutenant Governor Bob Bullock win his election. In 1999, Dowd switched his party to the Republican Party after meeting then-Governor George Bush, who impressed him with his talent for governing from the center and cooperating with Democrats across the aisle. So he switched parties and went to work for the Bush campaign. In 2004, Matthew Dowd was the Bush-Cheney re-election committee's chief strategist.
And I was there for the first 5 years of the administration, as you say, broke over the Iraq War. And then I think the president, reflecting back, had done a number of good things. What he did for aid to Africa, what he did in the aftermath of Katrina, and a number of things. And I think what you saw was everybody thinks this is a good man. But the problem that I saw in this whole thing, as we had that day and everybody focused on it, it's as if you were asking the people that got off the Titanic, they say, other than that, how was the trip? The Iraq War was a disaster. We spent over $1 trillion. We lost thousands of lives. I had a son that served there. We lost thousands of U.S. lives, thousands of lives over in Iraq. And the Iraq War, for at least 20 years, is going to affect, it's already affecting our foreign policy in Syria. It's affected our domestic policy because the lack of funds, the lack of ability, and it polarized the country. We pause for a moment and we say, yes, he's a good man. But in the end, the Iraq War was such a disastrous decision. His tie to history is going to be
Matthew Dowd's disagreements with George W. Bush came to a head as he watched the man who inspired him with his history in Texas and his bipartisanship began displaying loyalty to party politics in the middle of the Iraq War, with information that led to Iraq not only being false, but they continued to defend their decisions. For those of you old enough to remember, there was the whole weapons of mass destruction, WMDs of course. Turns out they weren't there. And instead of owning that mistake, the Bush-Cheney position was to move forward with the Iraq War. That was very difficult for Matthew Dowd on the fact that he does not agree with lying to the American public, covering it up, or putting party first, which he has been very clear about through his entire career. And it also wasn't great that his son was a soldier at the time. Sadly, his son is one of our fallen heroes. That was part of his decision-making, but not the only reason. And we'll go into that.
My conclusion on the Iraq specifically it's hard to say has nothing to do with that, but there's much more involved in what I believe about decisions that have been made, especially related to Iraq, that have to do with the direct interest of my son.
Yeah, there is, though, an inference that some drew him saying it's an emotional issue, that it's not an intellectual dissent, that there's something more heartfelt or visceral at work here.
Well, it's interesting. I think all the best decisions we make are heartfelt. And so part of what's in my heart is obviously my son, but it has much more to do with the whole panorama of the issues involved in Iraq than just one single thing about my son. Always tried to be one that whatever information I have and what I feel in my heart, I say it. And so I think like many Americans and like many leaders of both political parties, we all were under the sort of impression with the information presented that Saddam Hussein was involved in trying to build weapons of mass destruction. Everybody thought that, but it turns out that wasn't true.
The president seems to be remarkably loyal to the people whom he has brought into government. Personal loyalty seems to figure a great deal in this. Did the president's relationship and his sense of loyalty figure in your calculus of how to go about publicly breaking with him?
Obviously, it figured into it, the loyalty that he has and loyalty that we were all expected and some of us felt. Ultimately, that is the thing that I had to struggle with most. And I finally decided that really who we are is we're not supposed to be loyal to a person, or we're not supposed to be loyal to a party. We're supposed to be loyal to what truth we believe in ourselves and where our heart leads us.
Matthew Dowd, former chief strategist for President Bush's 2004 re-election campaign, who has now broken with the president, spoke to us from Austin, Texas.
Leaving the Bush campaign was a difficult decision for Dowd to make. His ultimate public break with President Bush is solely in response to what had happened with the whole Iraq war, a sentiment that would be Dowd's guiding star in his political evolution over the next course of his career. He left the Republican Party for good to stay true to those principles. By then, he was calling himself an independent and choosing to work only with politicians who he felt put principles ahead of party. And party loyalties had become very corrupt in his mind, and in 2007 he crossed the arena into political commentating, having a long history of insight behind the scenes of both major American parties, the Democrat and Republican, on both state and national levels. So it was an easy transition from there. So Matthew Dowd continued to work as a political contributor and guest commentator, and he's published with his insider knowledge on politics and his predictions for where our country is headed. I'll have a couple of links attached to this video. And that brings us to the present, 2021. Matthew Dowd watched our state of Texas become the front runner in America's sprint toward an autocracy. With the politics that shaped him mutating into the Trumpocalypse, Dowd decided his best hope to save American democracy would be to run against Dan Patrick and be Texas lieutenant governor.
The GOP politicians have failed us, especially the cruel and craven lieutenant governor. Dan Patrick has been lying and deceiving, fracturing the bonds we share and endangering all our lives. He does not believe in the common good. He seeks only to represent himself and the 5% of the state that goes along with all this. He puts his me over our we. With COVID-19 taking thousands of Texans' lives, Dan Patrick didn't respond to it based on science and prevented local officials from doing the things they needed to do to keep their communities safe. And in the aftermath of mass shootings in Texas, he pushed through a bill to make it easier for people to openly carry handguns without a permit or training. And when the electric grid failed here in Texas, he didn't protect us. He shifted the burden of fixing the system on each of us. And with healthcare costs out of control, the Texas Lieutenant Governor waged a culture war, decimating Roe versus Wade and attacking the diversity of our state. And after more Texans voted than ever before, in the most secure election in our history, the Lieutenant Governor attacked voting rights and has made it harder for all Texans to vote. Enough is enough.
And to be honest with you, we could really use him because, well, Dan Patrick has done a lot to really damage this nation. not just Texas, but the country in general. And he's not getting nearly enough negative press for some of the outrageous stuff he's done. For a great look at one of the things, I do have a video down below that you might want to check out. One of my favorite YouTubers, Beau the Fifth, he has a great video that he just recently put up about Dan Patrick's. So anyway, go check that out after this one. Being a Democrat does not automatically make a good politician. And having a history of support for Republicans does not make a liberal today any less of a force against the GOP now. And I say this because I started out as a Republican. And until 2005, when I abandoned the GOP for the very same reason that Matthew Dowd did, to be honest with you. I'm just saying, people who jump parties aren't necessarily partisan traitors, but more likely they are just trying to stick to their principles while party lines change. That's one of the reasons why I love Matthew Dowd as a candidate, because he is basically everything that Dan Patrick is not. So I urge you to listen to Matthew Dowd at every chance that he's out there, campaigning on the trail, or if he's on TV. Hear that he is one of us, that he has just as much reason to fight for all America. Put his words next to anything Senator Manchin has said or Senator Kirsten Sinema has not said. You can see there is a clear difference between a, to use the overused phrase, Democrat in name only, and a true politician who wants to be a public servant and not be served by the public. So where's the downside? I'll leave you with these final words from Matthew Dowd.
We need more officials who tell the truth, who believe in public service and common sense with common decency for the common good, and the idea of servant leadership. We need to expect more from our politicians and demand those politicians align with our values. Dan Patrick believes in none of those. And that is why I am running for the powerful office of Lieutenant Governor of this great state. It's time we all stood up to Dan Patrick. I hope you'll join with me in this fight. Thank you.
Because not only do I wholeheartedly agree, but I'm willing to fight by his side and yours to ensure it's possible, especially in Texas. Thanks again for watching Disabled Rebel. I'm Jedi Knight, and I'll see you next time.
Shut up and sit down.